9 offensive players in the top 10 of this mock draft, and the one defender may not be who you think. It's the top 10 of my mock draft on today's Renner Ranks.
This is Renner Ranks, the ultimate NFL ranking show. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into today's episode of Renner Ranks, your go-to daily ranks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Special shout out to those everydayers out there. And do not forget to subscribe, follow, like for free on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I, of course, am Mike Renner, host of Renner Ranks. Today's podcast brought to you by PrizePicks. The easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's right. It's the top 10 of this mock draft. Releasing all 3 at once here so you guys can dive in, obviously, with the format of these Locked On pods. 32 picks takes a little bit longer than the 30 minutes I am allotted for here. So we're going to break it up into 3 different parts, unfortunately. But we power through, and let's get to the top 10 here because there's a lot to discuss. An offensive-heavy top 10, a quarterback-heavy top 10, a wide receiver-heavy top 10, the passing game getting some additions, and it starts at number 1. And I'll say this before I get to this mock draft. No trades this first one. I went straight through 32 picks. Everyone picked at their spot. After the combine, we'll get into a little more trades. We'll start talking day 2 picks as well. May do a day 2 mock as well for that. But as of right now, with the draft order finally getting set for the very first time, I want to just go through as is. No trades just yet. So at number 1, Bears, USC QB Caleb Williams. Not breaking any new ground here with this one. Honestly, I'll talk more about the Bears at pick 9 with this, but obviously everyone at this point besides Homer Bears fans, not even Homer Bears fans who maybe went to Ohio State, are in the train of let's pick Caleb or let's pick a quarterback in this draft class. Maybe not necessarily Caleb Williams, maybe fans of other quarterbacks in this draft class, but they are in favor of trading Justin Fields for what you can get out of him. I do think that's going to be the case for the Chicago Bears when it's all said and done. At number 2, Washington Commanders. I have been going North Carolina quarterback Drake Maye. Now, a lot of people are on the Jaden Daniels train over Drake Maye. I'm not one of them. I still think there is something to, and I'm going to talk about this a lot over the course of this mock draft and over the course of draft season, but age adjusting. Jaden Daniels was not considered a first-round pick until his very last year, his 5th year of college, 5th year of starting in college as well. And really wasn't even considered, like we're going to talk about Bo Nix at some point later in this mock, not on this episode, but Bo Nix was at least considered, if he would have come out a year prior, probably would have been a 2nd, 3rd rounder after his tape, what he put on tape back in 2022 at Oregon. Jaden Daniels, that was not the case. So it is a meteoric rise from him. I do think with Drake Maye, we never got to see that meteoric rise, right? Like we never got to see him with the talent that Jaden Daniels had at LSU and what he could have been in a situation like that. We got to see him fight a pretty poor offensive line in North Carolina with some shoddy wide receivers, with his best wide receiver being kind of one-trick pony in Tez Walker. So I still think he's the play here for the Washington Commanders. Now, I've had my Cliff Kingsbury rant as well about whoever is going there could be in trouble. But I do think, at minimum, they have the ability to put talent around him. Now, the offensive line was awful a year ago. Yes, right. Like, no one's debating that. But $73 million in cap space now, the most in the NFL. I'd put as much of that as humanly possible towards this offensive line. You have receivers in Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin. That's a great 1-2 punch. Obviously, you'd like to resign Curtis Samuel as well, but TBD on if they do that. So they have the space. They have the picks after this. Pick 36 could easily be a starting offensive lineman for you as well. Someone like if you go interior offensive line, I think Graham Barton from Duke, Zach Frazier from West Virginia, both could play center for you, could be on the board there. You could even have one of the tackles like a Jordan Morgan from Arizona or Patrick Paul from Houston fall to that point and have a guy for the future. So there's options to fix this offensive line fairly quickly if you're the Washington Commanders. So I don't think you're putting them into a bad situation from a pure talent perspective, or shouldn't be, now for the Washington Commanders. But I do think, again, what Cliff Kingsbury's offense is going to look like still remains to be seen. But to me, Drake Maye's the pick. Number 3, New England Patriots. I have them going LSU quarterback Jaden Daniels. This one's a little... I can see arguments for the New England Patriots going elsewhere with this pick rather than quarterback. One, because I see the top 2 QBs, Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, kind of in a tier above guys like Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, in terms of how much I would covet them as prospects. And 2, because you're putting him into probably the worst situation in the NFL. What I just talked about with Commanders. Now the Patriots have $66 million cap space. They will obviously use a good amount of that to put whoever they're drafting into, or whoever is playing quarterback for the Patriots, into a better situation. But the fact of the matter is, this is the worst offense on paper in the NFL right now. And it's not only the worst offense, they have to, with that $66 million cap space, re-sign their 2 best players on offense from a year ago in left tackle Trent Brown and guard/tackle Michael Onwenu. So they basically have to spend money to maintain the status quo, spend a good chunk of that $66 million to just maintain the status quo, on top of then rebuilding an entire new wide receiving core, because you're losing Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki to free agency. Your starting wide receiving core is Devontae Parker, Juju Smith-Schuster, Tyquan Thornton, and Pop Douglas. It's ugly. It's ugly in New England. And so if you're putting a quarterback into that, and there's really only so much you can do over the course of one offseason in terms of fixing that situation, it's going to be a wake-up call for whoever it is behind center there for the New England Patriots. Unfortunately, that's just kind of how Bill left the cupboard. It's like, why was no one willing to give Bill Belichick full control? Look at the Patriots roster right now. That might be why. That is the decision-making that was going on there from a personnel perspective was a disaster for the past half decade, ever since Tom Brady left. So I can see the argument for just like saying it's not a good situation developmentally. We can put a great prospect behind it. He could realistically get broken in a way because of how little talent there is around him. Ideally, you're not just sitting still, though, and picking a Marvin Harrison Jr., right? Ideally, you're getting someone who's desperate for a Jaden Daniels to move up and maybe give you a future first rounder, because, again, you have such little talent. And then, again, I talked about this when we went over Lance Zierlein's mock. The difference between a Jaden Daniels' prospect and maybe a Michael Penix Jr., who you get in the second round, if you get a haul of picks, may not be massive in some evaluators' eyes. So I do think, and especially with Jaden Daniels being probably, for my money, the biggest injury risk in this draft class, as in terms of his play style, take some unnecessary hits out in space, his frame, he's the skinniest of the bunch here. I do think and obviously from a pure injury standpoint, Michael Penix Jr. obviously has the biggest injury risk, but just from how he plays the game, I would worry about him, especially behind that Patriots offensive line. So a lot to think about for the New England Patriots. They're the most intriguing team in the top 10, honestly, for me, because of that, because they're kind of at the crux of the QB3 spot, and they're in a weird spot from a team building perspective where you could draft Jaden Daniels this year and then be in a Bryce Young situation where you're drafting number 1 overall next year. And not say that, there will be a guy there waiting for you, but someone could break out. Quinn Ewers could break out. I don't love the talent returning to college football in terms of the quarterback position, but someone could put themselves in the map the same way Jaden Daniels did. And you could be looking at a weird situation where you're having that, Marcus Mariota debate that the Titans did way back in 2016, where they had just drafted the guy, and all of a sudden you're drafting number 1 overall. What do you do at that point? So I think there's a lot to chew on for Patriots brass at this point. We'll get back to the pod in just a second, but first, today's podcast brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. They're the easiest, most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is simple to play. I can make my picks, submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Now at number 4, though, Arizona Cardinals. This one picks itself, right? Marvin Harrison Jr., Ohio State wide receiver. Not really much to debate here. Pick 35 gets a lot more interesting to me for the Arizona Cardinals. This one, it's one of the wide receivers at number 4. You just, run the card in. Thank the Lord that the wide receiver class was as nasty as it is this year. Right? You're just like, thank you. That is what we needed. But you also need everywhere. So Cardinals probably are one of the more boring teams to prognosticate for this year because it's just like whoever the best player is, we should take them. There's no, does it fit a need? Every player fits a need for you right now if you're the Arizona Cardinals. All right, number 5, Los Angeles Chargers. This one has been prognosticated all over the map, this pick. But to me, there's really no debate. It's Malik Neighbors, in my eyes, the LSU wide receiver. They're the only other guy that I could even be talked into for the Los Angeles Chargers is Joe Alt. Because you have Justin Herbert in his mid-20s for a decade, right? You have a decade of prosperity on the offensive side of the ball with the guy Justin Herbert. The quickest way for that to end is obviously injuries. And for as much as everyone says that the Joe Burrow, back in the 2021, the Jamar Chase versus Penei Sewell debate, that it was cut and dry that Jamar Chase was the right call and it got them to the Super Bowl. It did, but it's also derailed multiple seasons since then with his injuries, right? Like it's the injuries, the fact the offensive line's been so bad has kind of, screwed over now multiple seasons for Cincinnati Bengals. So the only other way is that if I have Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, left tackle and right tackle, I'm set for the entirety of Justin Herbert's career, right? I have that in place that I know is going to be year in and year out a win for me. And if you're Jim Harbaugh, obviously he built through the trenches wherever he's gone. That could be an appealing, starting point to your Los Angeles Chargers coaching career. So that's the only other one. But if it's debating between Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, it's not close to me. It's Malik Neighbors, especially for this offense. You have ball winners. You have guys that can compete at the catch point and do those things. You don't have the guys that Malik Neighbors can do what Malik Neighbors can do, right? And now the senior wide receiver thing also, I think, deserves a little mention. This isn't to say that Rome Odunze isn't going to be an awesome NFL player. I think he is. But I do think you do have to adjust expectations for a guy who's kind of already had those late breakouts, who's already gotten to develop physically at the collegiate level and then produced, right? You want the guys who have the innate skill and the innate ability to produce prior to needing that physical dominance. And I'll just go back through and list here all the senior wide receivers drafted over the past decade. You had Zay Flowers, W, Jahan Dotson, 2022, solid. Devontae Smith, Kadarius Toney, 2021, Brandon Ayuk, 2020. So a good run of seniors. But prior to that, Corey Davis, 2017, John Ross, 2017, Mike Williams, 2017. Now, Mike Williams is a little bit of an interesting case because he would have come out. He was an early career breakout, would have come out the year prior as a junior, but had a big injury, so he came back for a senior year. Corey Coleman, Josh Doxson, 2016. Yikes. Kevin White, Devontae Parker, Philip Dorsett, Brashad Perriman, 2015. So track record of senior first-round wide receivers is spotty at best. It's just you trend towards the guys who have done it at a younger age. And Malik Neighbors was insane this year. I just, especially for the Los Angeles Chargers, who need that dynamism in their offense, this one is a no-brainer for me. All right, number 6, New York Giants. I'm going Notre Dame tackle Joe Alt for kind of the same reasons I outlined with the Chargers. You have Andrew Thomas, still in his mid-20s. You have Joe Alt, And yeah, you thought this was going to be what Evan Neal was going to give you. But Joe Alt's a much safer prospect. And this allows you to still like salvage Evan Neal's career by throwing him into guard and possibly showing up another position on that offensive line, where I think he'll be a much better in that regard. Now, I don't see him being elite by any means anytime soon, but I think a lot of his issues do evolve around playing in space, and that will alleviate some of them. So this helps whoever is your quarterback. And now this roster is tough, right? This Giants roster is not great. If I told you right now that they'd be drafting number 1 overall in 2025, I don't think anyone bats an eye at that. And the problem is they're still kind of an expensive roster. So there's no rebuild happening right now, like we're talking about with the Chargers, with the Patriots and their cap space. The problem is, if you're debating going quarterback here, that would be Joe Schoen, Giants GM, basically admitting that the biggest decision he's made in his GM tenure was an abject disaster. I just don't foresee that happening, right? The biggest decision being obviously the Daniel Jones extension that they gave him. That's costing them darn near $50 million against the cap this year. Now, OT is admitting a mistake also with the Evan Neal pick, but that one's, again, salvageable at least. So I do think Joe Schoen needs an easy W. You look at his draft track record of now, and it's not shaping up to be anything special. His top 100 picks, 2 years of them, Kayvon Thibodeau, Evan Neal at 7, Wan'Dale Robinson, 43, probably one of your best ones so far. Josh Izudu, 67, yikes. Cordell Flott, 81. Deonte Banks, solid as a rookie, pick 24 this past year. John Michael Schmitz, pick 57. Jalen Hyatt, 73. Not a lot of like surefire hits out of that group for a good amount of top 100 picks through his first 2 seasons. So again, need an easy W. Joe Alt is that in this draft. Look at the division, man. Look at the Giants. Look at the Cowboys. Shore up that offensive line, and then the quarterback position just looks better, right? It just gets better immediately when that's the case. On to number 7, Tennessee Titans. This one is easy. Washington wide receiver Rome Odunze. Now, you can debate wide receiver versus offensive tackle. We kind of just brought that up about the Bengals and Joe Burrow. Callahan coming over from Cincy, Brian Callahan, new head coach. He's going to obviously have a firsthand input about what that looks like, how that number 1 receiver can impact a game. They desperately need offensive line at every single position along this offensive line. I just think that Rome Odunze is too perfect for Will Levis, especially, to go OT here. And now you're hoping that, in the wrap in the second round, there is an OT there waiting for you. But the type of routes Will Levis likes to throw, basically dig routes, go balls, kind of jump balls, give his guys chance balls. That's where Rome Odunze wins, man. He's just too perfect for Will Levis' skill set, too perfect a pairing, too perfect to learn from like DeAndre Hopkins, one of the masters in it, that it all just makes too much sense for me and would be a dream scenario for the Tennessee Titans, that you give a guy who, if you're Brian Callahan, your quickest path to long-term job security is to have Will Levis turned into a franchise quarterback. The quickest way to do that is to give him weapons that make him look like a franchise quarterback. Rome Odunze is that kind of weapon in my eyes. Number 8, Atlanta Falcons. I have them going Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy. He's going to go higher than people think. I wouldn't take him this highly, but I do think for the Falcons offense, which is obviously going to look somewhat like the Rams offense, I would expect with Zach Robinson coming over from Los Angeles to Atlanta as the OC there. I think he's a good fit for that. His processing speed, his ability to work the middle of the field, his ability to play out of tight pockets, I think is all something that will play. You don't necessarily need to change it up from what Matt Stafford was doing last year. Now, he's obviously not going to be Matt Stafford year 1. That's not going to be the case, but I do think he has the capability to slot into that offense and be successful early on, especially with the weapons that they have. So would I do it? Probably not. Will they do it? I think they'd be definitely interested. Now, this one might sort itself out by April, though. They could be players for someone like Kirk Cousins, someone like Justin Fields. But until that, they have to be in the mix in this quarterback class, even, in the trade up mix as well, that we'll see, what happens with that over the next couple months. Get back to the mock in a second. But first, podcast is brought to you by DoorDash. DoorDash is the all-in-one app for your everyday needs, from restaurants and groceries to flowers and gifts. So next time you're running low on dinner ideas, pet supplies, or just time, you can get so much more than you realize delivered. Didn't have a chance to hit the grocery store last weekend after all the big game commotion? Or maybe your bar cart has been mysteriously cleared out. Stock back up for the week ahead with delivery from DoorDash. Whatever watch party or anything party you've got coming up, deliver it with DoorDash. Football season may be over, but we're in the thick of basketball games, the school year, and let's face it, winter. I can think of a million reasons daily to order DoorDash. Hop on the app and make your day a little bit easier. DoorDash, your door to more. Head to DoorDash app to get everything you need delivered. On to number 9 here. Chicago Bears. I have them going Texas DT Byron Murphy. Now, I know they drafted 2 DTs last year, in Gervon Dexter from Florida, Zach Pickens from South Carolina. Neither of those guys are Byron Murphy, right? And if you're the Bears, you need bodies as well. It's not like it's those two. If they turn out to be good, you're fine. You don't really have depth along that defensive line either. And I know you'd rather have edge, but to me, Byron Murphy is better than these edge prospects in terms of what he is as DT. This guy is special. The more I watch his tape, I'm just like, he has it. He is explosive. He is versatile. And for Matt Eberflus, with how he schemes up that defensive line, the front four, you need that impact guy in the interior. That's why they traded for DeForest Buckner when he was with the Indianapolis Colts. That's why they've been searching for that DT and never quite found it. Why the Bears offense has never quite looked good. It's because they don't have those impact guys. Now, you got the guy on the edge, Montez Sweat. Obviously, you'd love to pair him with another guy on the edge. But to me, Byron Murphy's too good to pass up at this point in the draft. Yeah, I just think he is special from an explosiveness, from an upfield penetration standpoint. And again, junior DTs, it's another position where youth wins. Here's all the junior DTs to go in the first round over the past decade. Jalen Carter, Brian Brzee last year. Quinnen Williams, Ed Oliver, Dexter Lawrence, Jeffrey Simmons in 2019. Yeah. Deron Payne, 2018. Kenny Clark, Robert Kimdiche, 2016. Robert Kimdiche failed, obviously, for maybe, let's say, not necessarily talent reasons. Chris Jones, not a first rounder, but was also a junior coming out that year into the early 30s. Eric Armstead, Malcolm Brown, 2015. That's a position where if you're good at a young age, when you're not the most physically dominant guy in the room, and now he kind of is, Byron Murphy, but that's even better when you're dominant physically at a young age. And so it's one where Byron Murphy's going to probably end up top 10 player for me on my board. And I think if you're the Bears, with the needs they have, they may feel similarly. Last pick of the top 10 here, New York Jets. I have them going Penn State offensive tackle Olu Fashanu. I just cannot fathom them passing on him for the other OTs in this class, whether it's Taliesa Fuaga out of Oregon, a J.C. Latham from Alabama, or a tight end like Brock Bowers. That's the only really other one I could see here in play, because the impact is now, right? You want the guy who tomorrow on an NFL field will make the most impact on this roster. To me, that's Olu, the Penn State offensive tackle. It's not even like a debate. He's the most NFL-ready pass protector after Joe Alt in this class. He has all the traits to get it done at a high level. You have the need at left tackle. We'll see what happens with Kai Becton if they bring him back. Even if they do, you'd still like to upgrade at that position. And it's just, man, prospects like him don't last to 10 every year. That one, I would be floored if he's on the board and they pass on him. I'll just say that. It's too big of a need, too good of a fit to do so. So, yeah, I know you don't want to leave your blind side sort of Aaron Rodgers coming off of Achilles to a rookie offensive tackle, no matter how good a prospect he is. But you're not really going to have those options, right? It's not like the Jets are going to be trading for Laramie Tunsil this offseason. It's just not in the cards. So, got to deal with the hand you're dealt, and this is the best hand you could play at the moment if you're the New York Jets, in my opinion. All right, there is the top 10. 11 through 22 on the next, or 21 on the next episode. 22 through 32 on the next one. You've been listening to Renner Ranks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.